Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for November 24th, 2023. I'm Benji Fisher, sharing my screen and moderating. Also present are Aaron McHale, Anushri Kumari, Christina Chumias, Niklas Missel, Ralph Kohler, and Simo Helston. Thank you all for joining. Let's start today returning to an issue we talked about some weeks ago. It's issue number 2519362, redesign the menu link add form to be less overwhelming. And I guess maybe I've got a sample Drupal site up here. Let's just go to structure menus. And I guess the administration menu is always the most overwhelming, so I'll start there. And this is the page we're talking about, the form to add a new menu link to a menu. It has all of these fields, most of which are typically ignored. And the idea is to redesign it to look more like, I guess I don't want that. The idea is to redesign it to look more like the node add form, where we have a main content area with the commonly used fields, and then everything else gets shoved over into these collapsed details elements in the sidebar. So that is the idea, and we have talked about this previously, and there are some recent comments on the issue suggesting some changes. So I guess a previous iteration. Let's look at this screenshot. A previous iteration had the sidebar looking like this when it's all expanded. By default, most or all of these are collapsed. So each details element has a single form element in it. Menu settings, comment settings, URL alias. Oh, this is the node edit form. I guess the previous iteration looks like this. No, that's the before. And here's the after. There we go. So the title, the link, and the enable checkbox go in the main area. Everything else goes in the sidebar. The detail element for the main navigation is expanded, and all the others are collapsed, or maybe that's not even the detail element. Before I go any further, is it clear enough what the problem is that we're trying to solve? Any questions about the context? And Ralph mentions that the current merge request doesn't apply, or maybe it's a patch, doesn't apply at the moment. So it would take some work to actually get a live example of this going. So this is what we discussed at a previous meeting. If I remember correctly, we approved the design, sort of deferring to the decisions made by the people implementing it. We suggested some changes, but we didn't discuss at length whether the sidebar elements should be combined or not. And in a recent comment, XJM suggested grouping them so that there's more than one form element in each collapsed details element. So I'm not sure expanded is a good label for the metadata accordion. After manually testing this, I'm also not sure having one element per collapsed accordion element is the best user experience. Then the user has to click to expand each element to see what it contains and modify it if desired. They gave a screenshot of the node element form. Each accordion element's label is a noun. Some of the elements are grouped logically while others are standalone. I think the menu link accordion should be as follows. 1, description. 2, display settings containing both the weight and the expansion setting. At a minimum, I think labeling each accordion element with a noun is required. Let's try implementing this and then get another review. And also include screenshots. So Utkarsh33 did some work and posted a screenshot as requested. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Benji. I think XJ makes a good point in that, like, if we think about what we're trying to achieve, like we're trying to make the form less, like, okay, so less overwhelming to look at first. And so the idea of moving some of the lesser used fields to the sidebar, I think is sensible. And I think we have to think about what's the value in, like, with the groupings, right? Are we do they logically make sense? Because there's, we don't want to go overboard and have a group for every single element. Like, that seems too much. But equally, like, I think we could find some, some logical connection between some of them. But having said that, it might be that simply putting those less used fields in the sidebar, like, maybe we don't actually need the groupings, because the node farm, for instance, does have a lot more, and there is some really key differences, like revision stuff is under one, the menu link things are under another, right? So the URL aliases, so there's some really logical separations there. I'm not sure how much you can say the same for the menu form, because everything you're doing is just about that menu link. So I would question whether we need to group things like that, but I think moving those less used fields to the sidebar is still a really valid thing to do. That's kind of where I'm thinking at the moment. So I'll just hand over to Ralph and see if he's got a hand up.
Okay. I think having those groupings sort of helps from a cognitive standpoint. That way you're easier to process the type of different form elements you have in the sidebar. But on the other hand, I wonder, even though it would break a little bit the pattern known from the node edit forms, to just have all those groups expanded per default. And that way you see everything at once, because you don't have that many form elements on the page, so might be a compromise.
Yeah, I think we suggested collapsing them mostly to reduce the visual clutter. So for example, the weight field was put into a details element, and that has the effect of hiding this rather long description text as well as the form widget. But let's have a look at the screenshot that we got after implementing XJM's suggestions. So what are the groupings? The parent link is open. And I think that, yeah, that's the same as it was in the previous iteration. And then these other things are closed by default, but the screenshot shows them open. There's the description in one, which is probably the same. And then the display settings combines two things: the show is expanded checkbox and the weight. So it's not a huge change from the previous version. So there are two details elements, whereas previously there were three. Whoa, sorry about that. This screenshot shows them collapsed. The screenshot shows them expanded. The labels are now description, unchanged. That has just one thing in it. These two are combined into display settings.
I think it's a win. I think this,
So you think,
yeah, grouping them, it's good. Not having them opened.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that you have them like grouped, and then you can collapse, and in a way that actually makes more sense, because actually the other I think, can you switch to the previous one where you had the
yes.
three, each of them? Yeah, I mean, expanded itself, it's like it's weird that you have to click in here, then click inside, and it's strange. So I think display settings is perfect. What I'm not sure is about that, having that like opened all the time, because as you were saying, if the purpose of that was actually simplifying the form, why would we actually have that on the right open? Because as you can see, every time that you have something open, the designs are prepared to be more prominent, meaning that you have like a lot of blue things or like active things, like screaming to you, hey, I'm active, I'm here, look at me. And it actually takes way more importance the right side rather than the center one, which should be actually the most important one.
I think actually by default they will be closed.
Okay, that's perfect.
And you can see that display settings is selected. That's because it was opened along with the other one for the purposes of the screenshot.
So we're not talking about having that opened by default.
Right. We're going to have them closed by default. They're just open for the purposes of the screenshot. Aaron?
So,
Yeah.
Benji, you probably will know the answer to this one. I'm wondering, the new, yeah, put you on the spot here. Let's find out. The new add child contextual link. Does that mean that the parent link is still there, or does that go away when you use the add child one? Because then you're already kind of setting what the parent is. You don't need to like, adjust it based on the you only need to set the parent if you use the top level add link, right?
What that new link does is set a default value for this. It does not remove it from the form element.
So it's still there. Okay, yeah.
And as Aaron is aware, I implemented this little change. So here I'm going to a live site, an administration menu, and if I want to add a child of block layout, there is now a link here, add child, my new element, or my new link. Some valid page just for the sake of example. And you can see the parent link is selected. So the menu is, the form widget is still there. It just has a default value selected. Point is that it's rather overwhelming to have to select it from here. If we save, it goes there. That got into Drupal 10.2, which will be released in a few weeks. So I think that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, that's good to know, just so that we because the other thing I was thinking is like if you've come from that add child page, sort of like I'm just thinking like, is there value in like not showing the parent link, but then maybe it's good to have it to have a sense of like, okay, it's definitely going to come under the under the be a child of the one you selected, but also then you have the option to change it. So it's probably, and then it's also like consistent. There's no like having this there consistently is probably good as well. So that's good. Yeah, I'm just also wondering, like, I'm trying to think about is there a way we could is there a way to maybe have further reduce the groupings, like oh, I guess that's the older. Is that the older version of that screenshot you're seeing showing there?
Yes.
Because do you have the? Could you go to the newer version? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I think display settings is good. I was just thinking, is there like description again is one where there's like just a single thing under description. So I don't know if it's worth thinking about like, does that need to be a grouping, or like could that be with parent link, or just does that make sense to keep it in its own grouping, given it's just a single field? But
Christina agrees with a little 100% emoji reaction. I guess my feeling is that what I'm looking at now is an improvement over the current design, and I'm willing to leave some decisions for others, but if we see some clear improvement, we should suggest it. But go ahead, Simo.
Yeah, I was just wanted to note that most of these settings are something that a lot of a lot of site builders do from the kind of the overview page, dragging and doing stuff like that, and also that at some point soonish we need to redesign the dragging interface so that it's WebCAG 2.2 compatible, so to improve that dragging. But this view is something that has the enabled and also the parent and wait. So this is another one that kind of for sighted users, I think this should improve usability over that form. So it's not so much a problem if a user can't easily find the information from a single menu item, because it's also here in a structured way. So there is two ways to do that.
And in the chat, Christina says redesign table drag 200%, and also gives it a, oh no, someone else gave a thumbs up
that was
reaction
me.
to Christina's comment. Okay. Yeah, and that is one of the reason to de-emphasize some of these elements in the form, to shove them over to the collapsed details element, because it is easy to use them from here. If we were going to rearrange, we have the option of moving things around. It's still overwhelming in a long menu like this, but but certainly the weight is something. Here I'll explicitly show the weights. You normally set the weight by clicking and dragging. You could set it from here. It's really not helpful to select the weight from this page, although it's possible. So I think I'm just agreeing with everything that Simo said. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah, before I say this, I agree that the weight is like almost entirely useless unless you really know what weight you need to select. But what I'm thinking is, and Benji, sorry, could you go back to the latest screenshot for me? With the ones expanded.
Trying to find the right one.
Yeah, there we go. I realized that like there's something doesn't quite sit right with me about the weight and the parent link being at opposite, like effectively opposite ends of that form, because they are like logically linked. Like you set the weight is within links at the same level, and all of those links have the same parent, or none of them have a parent. So like I agree that the weight field is like useless in a sense, unless you really know the weight. But another part of me is like, doesn't like seeing them not together, because on here they're together. Like on the page you're on right now, you'll see that weight appears below, parent link. And to me, in my head, that makes sense from a logical like grouping. But I also don't think we need weight to be that prominent. So I don't know how to reconcile those two things, because they feel like opposites, I guess. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That the two of them together determine the position on this list. And so they are logically connected. But then on the other hand, as I said a minute ago, it's basically useless to set the weight on this page, because you don't see all the other weights, unless I guess if you have clicked the link to show the row weights, and you say, I want something to appear under structure, and I want it to come after all of these other things, I can give it a weight of 1. So I have to both note what the parent is, and then note what existing weights are. Of course, they're mostly 0 by default.
I might be the only one who cares about weights though, and like actually setting them, because but that's probably just because I'm like a software engineer and always want things to be like incrementing nicely. So I'm just like, I think 99% of people don't care that the weights are a bit weird. Like when I'm sorting fields, I'm like, okay, this one is 1, this one has to be 2. This most people just let Drupal figure out, but I'm just yeah.
I think I'm with you there, Aaron.
Yeah.
But okay,
Like,
does anyone have any suggestions for reconciling these two things? That on the one hand, the parent link and the weight are logically connected because they determine where something shows up on the list. On the other hand, we want to hide the weight by default because it is so infrequently used. Is there any way to reconcile the two? Yes, that one option would be to go back to this previous version, and where everything is in a single details element, and then rearrange them so that weight comes right below parent link. But that would, of course, undo the recent work to group things.
Yeah. What if we put display settings directly below? So what if we flipped around display settings and description, and also rearrange it so weight comes before show is expanded, because then logically it's still in that order. Because I think also description is possibly the least, like personally, I almost can't think of a time other than if you're using for admin links that you would set the description.
Right, and can you see in Zoom when I hover over a link, it shows the title text?
I don't think
No.
so, because you're sharing screen.
Okay, well, just I'm trying to illustrate the what the description means, but as I
Right.
hover over reports, I see, but I guess Zoom doesn't capture the title attribute, view reports, comma, updates, comma, and errors. As I hover over people, I get manage user accounts, roles, and permissions. And that is what the description field does, shown when hovering over the menu link. And I agree that that's not used very often. In fact, I think there are some accessibility reasons for not using title attributes of links.
Actually, so what I'm seeing is arguing that this description field is useful because it is still in there. I think we've discussed several times that something that is in there doesn't, that something is in there doesn't mean that it needs to stay in there, that we need to question all these things. And I don't think in the new navigation is actually something that we are going to have for sure, at least not for sure on the ones that are going to be tools of the child items.
I'm sorry, could you say that last part again?
So for example, structure, the parent structure that actually has children inside. Exactly. If you hover over structure right now, you have a link. On the new navigation, you don't have a link because actually the whole thing is opening and closing. That won't have a description, probably. At least so far it doesn't have. So relying on that something right now it is like this, and that being an argument to keep it that way, or giving value to the description field because that's the place where it's used. I don't think that's actually it shouldn't have a lot of weight on making calls.
I was thinking in my head, but I didn't want to like say this. But since you mentioned it, Christina, like, yeah, I was thinking in the new navigation, particularly because, you know, so Christina at DrupalCon were doing user tests of the new navigation on mobile. And on mobile, you literally, you pretty much don't know the descriptions exist in the title. Like the title attribute basically is never shown to you on mobile devices normally. And
touch, yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, touch on touch devices, because yeah, you could be using like me, I have a laptop with a touch screen. So if I use a touch screen, I'm pretty much never going to see the title attributes. And so for a lot of people, like the title attribute isn't that useful. And as Christina said, like we might get to a point where those admin indexes, as we call them, the ones that list all of the links, like we just don't need them anymore. I mean, they'll probably still be there, but like we probably won't use them as much as we do now. So like, yeah, maybe having description as the very last thing is not the worst idea. Because then we don't want to, I also feel like we don't want to encourage people to use something that is just genuinely not that useful to people. Because if you think about it from like an accessibility perspective, if we promote the description field as a field, like by making it more visible in the form, we're kind of encouraging people in a way to use it. But we know that even outside of, I guess more so outside of the admin structure, as from what was said, like the description field is just not that useful to anybody. Even on desktop, like you're probably, if a site is setting like a description for like their home link and their about us link, I would say, why do you need to set a description in the first place? Like, what is it about those links that aren't clear in the first place?
We're getting a thumbs up from Ralph.
Yeah, so I would be really, really okay with us just de-emphasizing the description fields. I would also be okay with us completely getting rid of it, but that's a different conversation. But I think this solves the cognitive thing as well of like, if we took display settings and put it above description, and then we also like possibly flipped the weight and shows expanded so that weight is like at the top, then we still have that like connection between the weight comes after the parent link. So I'm going to stop talking because Ralph wants to talk now. I've talked way too much.
Go ahead, Ralph.
At first, a thumbs up for even considering to strike the description field. And on another note, the more I think about it, description is for me also sort of misleading, because with description, in the context of the Drupal admin UI, I associate usually something like the description for example, for content type, for the fields in a content type, or for example, menu items in the list. And that would be the place I would expect to see it. But instead, it's about a tooltip. And if the description in air quotes is kept for now, maybe name it differently, simply as tooltip. That way it would be way clearer for me as a user. That at the moment you have to read the description for the description field to know shown when hovering over the menu link. That's the place where the description is displayed.
Yeah, I think we've already created this follow-up issue to review the description text.
Okay. Forgot about it.
And that would be a good place to discuss changing the labels. I think rearranging the form is enough of a change.
Yeah,
We don't want
you're
to
right.
pile on additional changes for just to control scope. Go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that right now we're discussing how to reorder a form with existing patterns. And if we were having this conversation with designers, UI designers, that would be a completely different thing, because you would be actually creating new patterns, removing things, and this conversation is super limited right now to just using the things that we have in there right now on the screen. So, well, not in this screen, I mean, like on the current form. So I would be really aware of that. And if we are going to introduce new patterns with the new designs, maybe it's worth not giving too many thoughts to how we could make this form perfect with the tools that we have right now, and actually start thinking about new tools instead of like giving so many rounds to the same thing that it's currently not designed for this.
Yeah, and
As a designer,
I'm always in favor of making small changes, controlling scope, and I think that comes to the same conclusion that we should go ahead and make this improvement, and there's always a chance to improve on it further in the future. So I think we're pretty close to consensus, if I can just find the right screenshot, that what we should do, here it is. What we should do is rearrange things as we've described. So description goes to the bottom. Display settings go right below parent link, and also swap the two elements under display settings so that when it is open, weight is at least visually close to parent link, although separated from it in a different in the details element. I get a thumbs up from Ralph. Thumbs up from Aaron. And that's a small change that should be fairly easy to implement, given what we already have. Any further comments on this? Since I've been following the issue, I'll post a comment on it suggesting those further changes. And with any luck, we can actually come to agreement and get it in, and as I said, make further improvements in other issues. Okay, Simo, are you ready to take over the screen share?
Yeah, I can share the issue. I changed device, so would you mind if I can use the same site installation you have?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Are you ready to share your screen? And I'm afraid we have less than 20 minutes left. And I do see your screen.
So this is issue number 3325551. Add disable image resize setting to image fields. This one we already discussed, and we ended up proposing using radio buttons for choosing which way to do which way to choose it. Let's see, I'm trying to open this. The current
And Ralph has posted a link to the issue in the Zoom chat.
So current version should have the radio buttons. I'm now sharing a screenshot from that, the latest patch, and here we have two radio buttons with text resize larger images and reject larger images with an error message. So these ones are the text for the radio buttons were my suggestions, and here it kind of, I feel that at least we need to change this help text here, because for one reason it refers to the old term that was used for the image dimensions. So it's calling them resolutions, but we were able to fix that a couple of weeks ago. So that was merged. So now it's the field labels are actually saying dimensions. The variables are still wrong. But anyways, I'm thinking about what we should call this image resize policy, because it feels a bit, as a non-native English speaker, it feels a bit kind of technical. And then this help text, it's kind of, I feel it's too much information here, because it's already included in the options, most of it. And also it's very specific to mention that resizing images cause loss of EXIF data, and not maybe mention that it also causes loss of image data if it's there's the percentage for JPEG that is used. So it's kind of EXIF data. It's not the main problem for most people. So my idea was to maybe have in the help text as the last part, link to the page where we have the percentage setting for image, like I think it's GD, for the percentage of how much loss it should add to the what kind of the set the quality setting percentage for scaling images. And
Okay, Simo, before you go any further, in the chat, Aaron made a quick suggestion: image resize strategy rather than image resize policy. But before we continue, I'd like to give people a chance to ask questions. Is the context clear? Could you show us again how to navigate to the settings page we're talking about?
I didn't have at the moment my own site instance, and the link to the one you had that was in the chat before I switched devices.
Oh, so you need the link again?
Yeah.
Sorry. And I think, so I'm on a site that uses media, like the site is the Umami demo, so it does, you have to edit a media type or the image media type, and then manage fields and edit the settings for the image field. At least I think that's. Oh.
So I think article has field. So here is media image and then editing here.
Oh, it's where the media is used.
Yeah. No.
I thought it would be on the settings for the image media type.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's where it is. Yeah. True. Yeah. So here and here is image.
So currently, we have the maximum and minimum image dimensions. And I don't see any options for resizing. So I think that's an entirely new option being added.
Resizing is default if it exceeds maximum image dimensions. So what we are adding here in that issue is the option to refuse to resize, and instead refuse to refuse upload of too large images.
Right.
So that's the change.
Okay. Thanks for giving that context. Does anyone else have questions at this point about what problem we're trying to solve? What this new option does? As Simo said, it provides an option
it refuse images with bigger dimensions that are set maximum. So basically, it would be the same behavior that if somebody tries to upload file where the file size is larger than allowed. So if the dimensions are bigger than allowed, then it would reject the upload.
Okay, I don't see any questions, so go ahead and go back to the screenshot, and we can discuss the text for this new option. And I guess both the label of the option as well as that long help text, which is copied from the current version. So Aaron suggested image resize strategy rather than policy. I guess my first thought is something like what to do if the image is too large. But of course, that's a terrible label. That's too many words. Any other suggestions?
Maybe handling images, handling larger images. But if it is larger, does it have enough context? It has maximum image dimensions and handling larger images.
Yeah, and the new option does only affect the maximum image size. It doesn't have any effect on the minimum image size. So yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and according to the help text we have on the screenshot, with minimum image dimensions, the default is to reject the image. So the minimum doesn't allow resizing, and the maximum doesn't currently allow rejecting.
Of course, the text larger images is in each of the two radio buttons, so maybe we don't need to repeat it in the title, but I do kind of like having the title mention larger images.
We could have handling larger images and then resize image and reject image with an error message. So we could remove the larger from the options. Well, but how? Yeah, is that?
Keeping in mind keeping in mind XJM's comment from the previous issue, we should probably stick with nouns for these labels. So policy or strategy, those are both nouns.
Yeah.
But maybe let's look at the help text, which is too long. Maybe it's easier to come up with a good suggestion there.
Yeah. So maybe I'll go back to the issue. I had some notes there. So yeah, well, I think the options explain a lot more than the just adding the number, so it's kind of mostly self-explanatory. And I think the EXIF detail, EXIF is a kind of detail that maybe shouldn't be there. And yeah, I was thinking that as it says resize, that resizing can be done in different ways. So we could be more specific there to say scale proportionally. So that, yeah. So it's kind of obvious if we look at word by word. So choosing is it something that we should do, like say choose, because it's obviously a choice. So what should we explain what the choices mean?
Personally, I agree with you that the two options are self-explanatory and we don't need to repeat that. I noticed that on the existing page, that comment about EXIF data is already there, and under the maximum image dimensions. So so maybe instead of moving that text to the new option, we should leave it where it is under maximum image dimensions.
But the maximum image dimensions don't necessarily result in resizing. So if it's rejected, then nothing is lost. But I'm thinking that it might be if we would link to, where is the shared? If we would link about image quality changes to configuration media image toolkit, where it's set, where JPEG quality is set. So here it changes, it means that resizing images will reduce image quality into this. And we could also here mention that resizing removes EXIF data, because it's not mentioned here. And if that's relevant to someone, maybe it could be mentioned here.
In the chat, Ralph suggests changing the labels on the two options. So the first one is resize to maximum dimensions, and the second is reject images with an error message. And Aaron suggests drop with error message, so it's just reject image. And we don't need to explicitly say, or I'll just read his comment as written. I think it should be implied that an error will show. And we got a thumbs up from someone, from Ralph.
Yeah, I agree. The error message should be with error message should be dropped. But with that resize to maximum dimensions, I think I would maybe like to have that somewhere explained that it doesn't resize to maximum width and maximum height, but it resizes proportionally to the. So that might be mentioned somewhere.
Okay, I'm afraid we only have 1 minute left in the hour, and Ralph has raised his hand. So Ralph, if you could
just
say something
comment,
quickly.
The only reason why I added the resize to maximum dimensions was because larger images is sort of not clear from a user perspective. I wouldn't be also that clear what it means actually, and therefore I thought change the wording slightly and move the larger images out. That was the reason.
Actually, I don't like your proposal, Ralph, because that suggests that medium-sized images would be scaled up to maximum dimensions. At least that's what it suggests to me.
Yeah, true.
So I think I prefer the current proposal. Okay, I'm afraid we don't have time to come up with a firm recommendation here. We can either come back to this next week. Go ahead, Aaron.
Just yeah, thanks. Just real quick, actually, just before we finish up, just to say that for Ralph and anyone else who wants to jump into a call afterwards, if we maybe start at like 1/4 past or 1/2 past, if that's okay. We can decide in Slack, but I'll put a message in the Slack channel. So
I will join probably.
okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, this is unrelated to what we're talking about, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow, Benji.
That's okay. So I
could
always
make some proposals. I could make some suggestions based on this discussion so that we could continue in Slack.
Great, thanks so much. And I'll comment on the other issue. Thank you all for coming. I'll be back again next week. Hope you can make it then.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye. Have a nice weekend.